The secret to writing a successful musical has always been something of a mystery. Cult shows can rise to the top, just as mainstream blockbusters can fail to live up to their hype. But the story behind the multi-award-winning hit, Jerry Springer the Opera, is far more unconventional than most.
I used to do a double act on the comedy circuit, and Stu would sort of, we'd do the bill sometimes with him, you know, share the bill, he'd be doing comparing.
The idea was that people could do any comedy as long as it wasn't stand-up. And Richard Thomas used to do these things with an opera singer, Laurie Luxemburg. And I think that's sort of where a lot of his ideas of abuse over beautiful music kind of started. And we did a sort of a version of that for BBC Two called Attention Scum.
And that featured a lot of little kind of 5-second, 8-second opera gags.
Ask not for whom the bell tolls. Ask not for whom the bell tolls. Just open the fucking door and let me in.
One person who was working closely with Richard Thomas at this time was Tom Morris, artistic director at Battersea Arts Centre.
Richard said, well, I've been watching a lot of the Jerry Springer Show recently. Been watching it rather more than's good for me, and I've decided that it's a good subject for an opera.
It just struck me, look at all these people screaming at each other, you can't understand a word they're saying, they're all different ages, sizes, shapes, it's so over the top. You've got an audience screaming at them. It's actually incredibly operatic. It's a very simple idea. It's the simplest idea you could ever imagine.
In a way, all that opera offers is a way to see what happens to characters when they're taken to such a degree of pain that there's almost nothing that they could do except sing.
I don't give a fuck no more if people think I am a whore. I just wanna dance. Oh, I just wanna dance.
I went down to Battersea to see what Richard said was how to write an opera about Jerry Springer. I had no idea what to expect. Went down there, saw what I think was about 25 minutes of the eventually completed show. Richard Thomas, 3 singers and 6 people in the audience, and I laughed more or less non-stop for 25 minutes.
It was a lecture, a late-night lecture at Battersea Arts Centre called How to Write an Opera About Jerry Springer. And I just bought a pile of beers, and basically it was a beer for an idea. So I'd talk about it, and if anybody had a good idea, they'd get a can of beer.
Loads of people said, that was great, do that as a show. And other people said, no, you should actually try and write the Jerry Springer opera. So he did it again, about half an hour of material with about 4 singers. And after that, I saw that and it was brilliant. And he said, would I come and help him make a story out of it, basically?
Doing comedy on stage needs somebody who really understands it. And it wasn't difficult to persuade Stuart to do it because I think Stuart has got an incredibly good eye for a hit. And I think he smelled hit right from the first day.
I wanted to know that an audience would understand it, whether they were fans of the television programme or not. And I felt like Richard brought this massive knowledge of Jerry Springer to it, whereas what I brought was ignorance. Ignorance of opera, ignorance of music theatre, and ignorance of the Jerry Springer Show. And those 3 things helped to make the show a success.
Each version, Stu said, oh, I don't want to direct it. And anyway, that's so... I don't think he didn't want to direct it, but he did.
We didn't have any money to find anyone else, and I was sort of in the room. I didn't have any kind of ambitions to be an opera director. So it was a sort of accident, like a lot of things.
No, you don't. If you don't want to direct it, don't direct it. Well, I don't want to direct it. OK, well, don't direct it. OK. But that's a way of saying he wants to, I think.
Baby, I love you with all of my heart, but there is one thing you can do for me.
Initially, it was effectively a series of kind of sketches about the Jerry Springer Show set to music, and Stuart kind of helped give it a structure which led to what I think is a really fully formed show.
My idea was that we would replay the Jerry Springer Show of the first half on some kind of mythological level. In the end, we chose the Christian stories from the New Testament and the Old Testament, where we pulled out various characters from the Bible that seemed to reflect the characters that were Jerry Springer Show guests in the first half.
Having performed the show in 4 different forms at Battersea Arts Centre, Richard and Stuart turned their attention to the 2002 Edinburgh Fringe Festival.
In truth, we hadn't quite nailed the second act, so it was another chance to give that just to try that out.
I think the thinking behind taking the show to Edinburgh was to put it in a place where lots of people would see it and see if we got it seen, would that mean that anyone would want to develop it further? And as it happened, that was the case.
The last show I'd done in Edinburgh, prior to Jerry Springer, the opera, I performed to, in front of 4 people, I rarely got over 10 people, and there was a time in my life when I, experienced quite a lot of failure. And what was great about Jerry Springer, the opera, was day 1 we had about 80 people, day 2, 750. Because I tell you, when you've done a few shows where you've just had 3 people in, there's nothing more heavenly than a sight of a long queue. Oh, God. So that was a great moment. I loved that. I got pictures of it. God, I'm so sad.
3 weeks into its Edinburgh run, the show received a visit from a very special guest.
We didn't know for sure whether he was going to be here. And about 2 minutes before performance, we heard all this cheering from the audience, and we knew it could be nothing else.
We met Jerry up in Edinburgh Festival, and he was very nice to us, very charming, very magnanimous.
We'd had some problems before then whereby Studios USA, who own the Jerry Springer show, had tried to stop us doing the opera. But Springer, to his credit, kind of headed them off and said he thought it was okay if we did it.
He loved the music. He said it was a great idea, and it was very pleasant, very relaxed, very assured, and said he'd help with promoting it and stuff like that.
Opera really is our show put to music, because our show has all the traditional themes of opera, of classic opera. It has the chaos, the mock tragedy, the farce, gender misidentification.
Couldn't have gone better, basically. Couldn't have gone better.
With the Edinburgh Festival drawing to a close, an offer to bring the show to London came from an unexpected source.
I first heard about Jerry 18 months before it finally hit the National Theatre. My colleague Nick Starr told me about this workshop that was happening at Battersea Arts Centre, worth seeing. So I went, and there was a brilliant first half, no second half at all. And I thought that this was the most inventive and the most exhilarating piece of musical theatre I'd seen for a very long time.
When we first got asked about going to the National, I wasn't sure about it, because I was worried that it would place the show within the kind of bracket of high culture, and that this would put people off going. As it happened, it was fantastic.
The show had been gathering an audience which doesn't normally go to the theatre, so to then take that and put it into a very traditional theatre arena is quite a big decision.
The joke couldn't have been better than doing this show at the Temple of Culture. And whenever there's a problem in thinking about design or script or anything for the show, I think what we always say is, don't think of it as a comedy, think of it as how you would do a high opera, a really important piece of culture. And that always seems to solve the problem. And so doing it at the National, where high culture normally happens, actually was perfect.
This big sort of sound and all these cards sort of blow up, and then you deliver down on this music which goes...
With work on the first full-scale production underway, Richard and Stuart still felt that the show needed further improvements, one of which involved the introduction of a new character to the second act.
Well, we've written a new song, a new God song, which,
He's written a nice song.
So we're going over and teach Benj to sing it. It ain't easy.
They got me in for Edinburgh. It was a different second half, and I was just played Dwight. But then they said they wanted a little bit more of me, so they created God. By the way. That'd be fun. Of course, lovely. Lovely tune.
We did reach a problem, though, where we needed a dramatic end to the show. We needed some kind of climax. And it wasn't until we got to the National Theatre and there actually was money to pull Jerry Springer up in the air in a kind of gibbet with fire and smoke coming up at him that we could really achieve that. Everything else we'd managed to do musically.
Even at the first workshop, the first half of the show was recognisably what it is now. It was on a much smaller scale, but it was extraordinarily accomplished.
This is my
When we first did Jerry Springer the Opera, it was like a kind of infant school play where all the props and costumes were borrowed and it was very much suggested. Now we've got a cast of 33, a band of 8 and a massive set and stage, and actually it works better. Initially, at the very low level, the suggestion of what you wanted it to be was really great. But now it's fully realised, and for the joke to work of Jerry Springer the Opera, it has to be as epic as an English National Opera production of Wagner, and it does feel like that now.
Following the hugely successful run at the National Theatre, and with an unprecedented demand for tickets, the decision was taken to make the show a more permanent fixture in London's West End.
There were people that said the show could go to the West End, but there were many more people that said it should never go to the West End. And there were many people that said if it went to the West End, it would last a week. So to end up with the kind of critical praise that the show had at the National and the sellout that it was, and to sort of be swept into the West End by that was pretty extraordinary.
On the 10th of November 2003, Jerry Springer the Opera was launched at the Cambridge Theatre in London's West End. The star-studded audience responded to the opening night's performance with an overwhelming 10-minute standing ovation.
I think actually it was always meant to be an opera. I don't know why Jerry didn't do this himself. You know, that's genius.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think it's really good.
Maybe we could all benefit from going to see Jerry Springer. I think it's a great show.
People obviously love it. It is such, I mean, take me out of it, it's just a phenomenal opera. I was amazed to see how the crowd was responding.
There was a perceived sort of crisis in music theatre. Critics were saying, where's the new kind of shows coming from? Where's music theatre material that addresses contemporary concerns and isn't necessarily drawn from the existing songbook of a 1970s rock band? You know, where's the new stuff? And I think, without setting out to answer that question, it seemed like Jerry Springer the Opera was an answer.
When I first saw the show, there were 6 people in the audience. In that same venue 3 days later, there were 50. There wasn't any marketing. It was just word of mouth. And right from the very beginning, the word of mouth and the press was so great for it that it always seemed like it was going to have a future.
I don't know what the future for the show is as such. People always assumed it would have a future in America.
We hope the show will continue in the West End, and the intention is to take the show on tour in the UK at the end of the year. And we are engaged in raising money to do the show in America.
Come and see.
Very early on, what we had to do with the performers in it was say, even though the language of this is aggressive, what the person's wanting is some kind of human contact or compassion on some level. And I think that's sort of the key to it, really. I think if people take one thing away from the show, it should be that they should just get over themselves and stop making such a fuss about things.
I'm an old school writer, I think, in many ways, and I like a crowd, an audience, to have a good time. The sound of laughter to my ears is very, very joyful.
I think you come out of it feeling, ideally, moved and uplifted on some level.
That's a good thing about musicals and operas is you can have your cake and eat it. You can have laughs, laughter, tears, the whole lot. So if you bit of all of that, then I'm happy.
My mother would have been so proud. Gerald, you got culture. You're an opera.
I'm sorry.
Oh, not getting my can.
Yeah.